2026 sees me travel the length and breadth of England to run a marathon per week in each of its 39 historic counties. Why? To raise funds for Tommy's, the charity that does incredible work to try to end the heartbreak of baby loss. I'll be joined each week by someone who has their own story of loss, their own rollercoaster journey, their own reason to be there. This podcast shares those stories in the hope that they can bring awareness to an often undiscussed topic and even, perhaps, a flicker of light in someone's darkness. You can follow the runs, the stories, and donate to the cause at marathonsformiracles.com. Enjoy. Hello, welcome to yet another episode of Marathons for Miracles. We are almost a quarter of the way through week 9 this week, and one very close to home for me this week. We're talking to Tom. Hi, Tom.
Hello, Ollie.
Tom is one of my best mates. I was at uni with him. I've known him for years and was, I think, the first person I spoke to about the challenge. Tom has done himself some fairly stupid things in his time, so I predominantly gave him a call initially to see if he thought it was feasible, which he did.
Crucially, I think stupid in terms of exercise.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, yeah, once Tom had greenlit the whole thing, I then, due to the stories that we're about to discuss, then asked if he wanted to be involved, which he said he would. So firstly, welcome along and thank you for getting involved.
Pleasure, Ollie. A pleasure.
In the usual fashion, I will ask what it is that led you to be involved with Marathons for Miracles.
Yeah, I mean, I now have 3 young children. I've got a set of twins and I've got a younger one. The twins are nearly 4 and the young one's sort of a year and a half. And all of the sort of stuff that's sort of more relevant to this challenge predates that. In some respects, it almost gets forgotten or it gets pushed to one side and it's less relevant for us as a family. And I think it's important to consider the journey and how we got to, because, you know, before we had, I mean, the twins element in itself was a massive challenge and a massive, whoa, okay. and that came actually very recently after my wife's miscarriage. So it was one of those things that you had a period of bad news and that didn't work, and then a period of no way, are you serious?
Yeah,
this is going to be very difficult, and then having another child after that. So there's a whole journey there and a whole story that pushes inevitably, I think, pushes the first elements of that story and the first elements of the journey towards the back, really. So I thought I'd start on and talk about the run up to all of this and how, you know, why we wanted to go, you know, why do people want to have children? Why do people want to put themselves at risk, put themselves in this position?
Yeah.
And I've seen a whole load of numbers. I've seen numbers that are saying sort of 1 in 5 pregnancies result in miscarriage. I've seen 1 in 3 pregnancies result in miscarriage. You know, Tommies themselves say, I think 1 in 5, but I might be wrong.
1 in 4.
1 in 4. Well, there we go. So it's not 1 in 100.
No,
it's not 1 in 1,000. It's 1 in like a really low number.
Yeah.
So this happens. It happens a lot.
Yeah, you're between sort of 20 and 30% wherever you sit, which is a lot.
And there was a moment in time where sort of another 2 of my friends were pregnant, and we were the ones who lost the baby. So we were the 1 in 3.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things that happens, and it's not that it's normalized in society. It's certainly swept under the carpet in society. And I was thinking through before this session, I was thinking through, well, where have I seen this in society? And one of the things that came to my mind actually was the comedy show Fleabag. There's a scene where this frankly dysfunctional family is sitting around a restaurant, a dinner table at a restaurant, and one of the sisters is having a miscarriage. It's this sort of shock horror element of it, the sister then disappears off to the bathroom, and the other sister goes with her, and then the sister who's not having the miscarriage comes along and at the meal says, "I was having a miscarriage," and everyone feels bad for her. And it's that was the sort of dark joke that was going on there. But that was the only time. I mean, and it was. I found it really interesting how that was brought up and used as a comic effect, because it's so horrible and it's so nasty. And I found that a brilliant metaphor for what actually happens in society and what actually happens in life, because people don't want to talk about it. So when I told my wife that I was doing this, or I asked my wife probably that I was doing this, she said, "Well, you can't talk about anything. You can't talk about anything that's private. It's a very private matter." And I know that you've said to me, Ollie, there are a number of people who are doing this. It's either happened very recently to them, or it's a really challenging topic for them, and it's not something that they want to discuss.
Yeah.
And I totally get that. So I have to be mindful of that.
Yeah, of course.
But I think what it, certainly what I do want to talk about is the journey.
Yeah.
Because the journey from, as a couple, deciding, yes, we'd actually like to have children, or, as a couple not deciding that you'd like to have children, going through that process all the way to having children, them growing up, them becoming, older children, adults, whatever, all the way through. That's a whole really long process that every single generation has gone through,
Yeah.
to state the obvious. And the difficult elements of that are often ones that you sweep under the carpet. And I feel this counts as probably the most difficult element of this. It's incomparable to my child broke their leg one year while we were on holiday, or and we don't really talk about that, or we had this big row between this sister and that sister.
My child did break her leg, and I can assure you it was nowhere near as difficult.
Yeah, exactly.
As going through the miscarriage was.
There are always bad things that occur, and this is one of them. And this is, for some people, is often the worst thing. For those who are really the most sort of beneficial of Tommy's support, and the people who are really struggling to have children, it becomes a massive problem, huge problem, and hugely traumatic. And every single time, almost certainly gets worse. We're in a very fortunate position that it happened once, we think, happened once to us. And after that, we had this wonderful set of twins. So it's that first period of time, the whole journey thing, that I think is really, really, really important.
Yeah. So what did that journey look like for you and your family?
Yeah. So there are, there's a whole range of things you can do. You can sort of lower ends, you can not decide to have children, and it suddenly happens, or at the upper end, let's say you go down a very sort of defined process, and you say, right, we'll go down something like an IVF route, and there's a whole spectrum of things in between. Mm-hmm. There's this whole process that you can go down, and we were only just starting on that journey. We knew that we wanted to have children. We knew that perhaps this was going to be challenging, and we wanted to see what it was going to be like. So we ended up in the center where they were giving us all sorts of advice. Some of their advice was pretty, to state the obvious, pretty easy to follow, right? Or it was pretty straightforward sort of stuff. And other elements were really interesting. So the whole thing about, well, you have to test the lady and you have to test the man, something that I think a lot of people don't really consider. And something,
you think the male bit gets forgotten?
I think there's a real thing about, it'll be fine. Like I'm fine. Mm-hmm. It's a sort of masculinity thing. It's like, oh, you must be the problem. Your eggs aren't working, or whatever. Actually, no, absolutely not. You've got to look at everything, and you've got to analyze everything, and you've got to maximize your chance of success.
Absolutely.
This whole process, I certainly took this whole process as it's a numbers game, right? You're playing the odds. You've got to, if this is what you want to achieve, if you want to have children, then there are certain things that you can do, and ways that you can maximize your chance of success. So yeah, that's how we sort of looked at it.
Just to let you carry on in a moment, but just to perhaps state the obvious slightly, but from what you're saying here, there's investigations, there's testing happening. We don't need to put too fine a point on it, but we can assume from that from the outset, there was an element of this isn't a straightforward pregnancy journey. There were some background issues, let's say.
Yeah, and there was an element of the unknown. We didn't really know.
Yeah.
So, better to be safe than sorry,
Yeah.
right? So we thought, well, we've got, a period of years where we want to do this. So let's go for it. Let's do it properly. Let's do it accurately. Let's do it as efficiently as we possibly can.
That's not like you'd.
And so, we adopted that approach. And we received the news after sort of, I don't know, a couple of months of going through the whole process. And, I for one, I found out that I had quite a low zinc
count
concentration or count. Yeah, count. So I was there taking my zinc tablets, and that takes sort of 3 months or so to build up and blah, blah, blah. So there was a number of things like that, little things that one can do to improve your chance of success. So we did that, and you get to know all of the people who are in the team who are doing this with you, right? Mm-hmm. So we get the great news that yes, you're pregnant, and you go along for these little scans and say, oh yeah, you can see it all sort of forming, and it's brilliant. This lady's Dutch, so we know she likes cycling around. So oh, brilliant, fantastic, and we go around and we buy her like this little orange bicycle bell. Great, she'd love that. It can go on her bell. She's Dutch. She likes orange. Great. And off we go and buy her this little gift. And she sort of, it was really interesting. She took it and she was like, oh, thank you. And she was a bit wary of it. And then obviously a few weeks later, totally different. Not, but there was a bit of false hope. There was an element of false hope going on there. Mm. And it was a great lesson actually for us that, you keep things to yourselves. And we were keeping things to ourselves. I think I told one person.
Yeah.
And but then that also leads to quite a challenging conversation later, because you're like, well, actually, no, it didn't work. And if the people a lot of people just don't fully appreciate that, or don't understand it, or haven't been through that journey themselves, and it's a very difficult subject to raise. But then after that, literally the month later or the month after that, we had twins. So it was very, very challenging. And you have this period of elation and also the period of concern when you find out that it's happening again, because then you're there going, I'm not sure if I want to be happy about this. I'm certainly not buying any bicycle bells. I'm not sure if I want to be celebrating. I was there. There's a really old school basic website that you can go on, and it calculates or it shows you the chance of miscarriage, and it gives you a number, and that number goes down incrementally every single week. Yeah. I don't know what it's based on. I think it's just based on a whole load.
Was it based on sort of how many weeks along you are?
It's yeah. So it's frankly it's basically like a half a bell curve, yeah. And it says, well, you will, the first couple of weeks got a massive chance of failure. There's a chance of whatever.
Yeah.
And then as you go down, as time goes on, as you hit like your 20-week window, 12-week window, as you hit your 20-week window, the chance just really, really drops. And for me, from a numbers perspective and from a very pragmatic perspective, that was really reassuring. And I was looking at that, and as every week went on, I think it did it on a daily basis, which is not strictly accurate or effective, but anyway, yeah. It did. And I'd look at it, and I'd sort of obsessively look at it. I'd look it up on the phone. So, okay, where have we got to? Okay, we've gone from 33, now on like 30. But that shows that that's a big risk. That's a massive risk that's still there. And I certainly found that by the time I should have looked it up before this, but by the time you get to your 12-week period, the chance of loss has significantly reduced. And
yeah, we had Louis on a few weeks ago who quoted a number that they'd had from a fertility doctor about the 13-week point. suggesting that you were at 97 and a half, something like that.
Something like that. It was, in my mind, in my very straightforward sort of mathematical approach to everything, tolerable.
Yeah.
Right. Whereas in the early days, it's a high charge. And I think our first got to, 8 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks, something like that. So we're in that real sort of risk zone. But also, and I think this is very important. There are a lot of embryos, a lot of fetuses that don't even get to day one. And are they? If you continue that graph up, then they're sort of way up there. Nature is extremely good at filtering. Nature is extremely good at deciding which of those embryos, which of those people are really going to struggle and are not going to be able to continue. And in those early days, I certainly found it absolutely fascinating how brutal nature could be about that.
Yeah.
And it was like, no, not going to work, go. And that's a very difficult and different concept for people to get their heads around, because, you nowadays, you're pregnant. You've got all these scans, you've got all these opportunities to and in those very early days, it's traumatic, it's shocking.
Yeah.
It's it becomes a real psychological thing.
And beyond that, of course, as you say, you haven't necessarily got to get pregnant. It's that journey for a lot of people where they might not get pregnant for 2 years, and it's the emotion. It's the
emotion. Every single time it happened once for us. Every single time it happened, it's nasty, it's horrible, and you get knocked back every single time, and you think, maybe this isn't for me. Maybe this isn't going to work. Maybe it's not going to work well. And for us, at least, we look at the 3 children we have now, and we feel incredibly lucky, because you look at the statistics, you look at the odds, and you think, yeah, okay, this is pretty hard work for a lot of people.
I've got a lot of questions I want to ask.
Go on.
And I think that's a very interesting introduction, and actually quite a different mindset and approach to a lot of the other people that we've spoken to, which, knowing you, doesn't surprise me for a moment. You've spoken a lot about quite a scientific and statistical and reasoned approach to the whole thing, going from when you first decided that you were going to start trying to get pregnant through to when you'd had the loss and when you were then subsequently pregnant with the twins. And I would say, on the face of it, you have a very pragmatic attitude towards what happened. However, when you talk about the extent to which you were analysing the numbers and checking the graph every day to see how it had changed, and
it's unhealthy, I would say.
That one loss clearly had quite a significant effect for you moving forwards.
So if I was obsessive on the first one, I was doubly, triply, quadruply obsessive on the next one, in terms of where have we got to, and frankly, that on our young one as well, on the third child, I was equally aware of it not working, and don't get your hopes up. This is, if we can get to here, then great. If we can get to here, really good. And there's I really don't want, because I'm very conscious, of course, of what I'm saying is quite statistical, and is quite is not very emotional, and I'm very, very aware of that. But look at it as though you're running a marathon. You get to a 10% of the way through, and you have to give up. You're like, oh, that's really bad. You get to sort of halfway through, you think, I can do this. I've done this so far. I can do the next bit. And in some respects, it's the same. You're looking at that, graph. I'm looking at that, the numbers, and I'm thinking, okay, these early days, don't know yet. It's a long journey. It's going to be really difficult. And then you get later on down the line, and the numbers are saying, well, you should chances are it should work, but you still have that lingering doubt. You still have that, I don't know if this is going to work all the way through.
Yeah.
And I'd say the last month before birth is a totally different story, another different kettle of fish. But
Like with a marathon,
certainly in terms,
you're just desperate to get to the finish.
Desperate to get to the finish. There's this sort of assumption and belief that you will, but also the horror of the unknown, actually.
Because you said that you are aware that you're not overly emotional about it, but I think emotions manifest themselves in different ways, and your stress around the situation, which in others might manifest as being very emotional or being very, very worried. However these things come out, your emotion was channeled into seemingly sort of trying to make sense of the whole process as much as you could.
Yeah, definitely.
Was that a desire to sort of gain some control over it in the situation where actually there's very little control?
Trying to rationalize it, perhaps. Yeah, I agree with you. I think, yeah, there's no control, but I think that's also a very important point that one has to accept. You have to accept that there is no control to this. You know, people get concerned. Oh, should I go running? Should I go on my bicycle to work? Should I go and should I go swimming in the icy lake? Whatever your sporting thing that it is that you do. And all of the advice is just continue as normal, do whatever you're doing. And one of the reasons for that is it doesn't make a lot of difference, actually. Just keep doing what you're doing. Don't get worried about it. So it's more about continuing your day-to-day life. And I think that's a very important point, that there is nature has already decided what's going to work, and it's just figuring out the final point, or just saying, is this going to work? No. Okay. And then maybe 10 weeks in, is this going to work? Well, yes, maybe, or no. And it's that.
And that's a brilliantly pragmatic approach to be able to take, but it's a very difficult one to
Oh, it's impossible. It's impossible to. I mean, you can't.
When
You
you're in
can't.
the throes of it, and
Yeah.
as you've said yourself, you were obsessive about it at the time. So despite the fact you can sit here now and say what was going to happen has already been decided biologically, but still, as you go each day, you tick off that next 2% on your graph that says you're closer, a step closer. So it's certainly no criticism. It's just it is a very interesting.
I think there's two points to make there.
Yeah, the point of interest here is, for me, listening to you, on the face of it, it's a very, very different approach to a lot that we've seen. But actually, I think when you unpick it psychologically, there's the same concerns, the same stress, the same lack of control, and the same desire to just get to the end point, but knowing that you're still playing the lottery, playing the numbers.
Completely. And yeah. And my 2 points on that really is, well, where do you stop? You know, if my child's now, I've got twins, they're sort of nearly 4 years old. One of them's very unwell. You know, they've got cold and flu. They're in bed. They're not going to school. Blah blah blah. What if the other one was riding along a bicycle and got run over by a car? Like, where do you stop worrying? Where do you stop questioning whether that life is going to continue to a certain end point? So it's a never-ending concern.
Yeah.
I don't, by the way, have a graph and I'm looking at every day to check if my children are more or less likely to die at this age group. Thank God.
Just to sound like Mr. Brown from the Paddington books.
But the second point is, I don't think I was very much help in the hospital, actually. I think my approach to this was, this is really bad for you and for me, of course, but you're clearly, this is sort of me to my wife, you're clearly having to go through this procedure. This is not going to be pleasant. And, you try and provide as much support as you can. But I mean, it's very difficult. It's very, very difficult emotionally, and moving on or not moving on. Yeah. A lot of people don't want to move on. They want to hold that memory, which is fine.
There's one thing you said earlier on, which was really interesting to hear. You were talking about taking the decision to begin a pregnancy journey, or otherwise. And the term you used was deciding whether or not to put yourselves in that position and to put yourselves at risk. Do you think that that is something that you had in your head 5, 6 years ago when you started this? Or do you think that that is something that you've implanted since, given what's happened between now and then?
I think that's a really good question. I think it was there, but I don't think there was an appreciation of what that risk meant and the implications of that risk. You know, you could be playing Russian roulette and you might not really realize what the impact of that bad event is.
Because we not in.
So I think,
Yes.
I agree. I agree. Actually, I think, yes, I was looking at that graph, or yes, I was aware of the statistics 1 in 3, but I am generally an optimist. Generally, I think it won't be me, or that won't happen, or whatever.
So you think you were aware of those statistics when you started the journey?
I was aware of them, but was I aware of the scale, the sort of impact and nature of them? You know, you can see a number, you can see a 1 in 3, and your mind can say, well, that means 2 in 3 for me. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
That's all right. We'll be fine. Or you can look at it in a more pessimistic sense and think, that's quite a lot of people who it's going to impact.
Well,
that's interesting.
That then follows on quite nicely into something else that I was going to ask. Is you talked about this the sweeping under the carpet effect when it comes to the topic of miscarriage. Do you think that, as you've said, we've seen throughout this conversation your sort of scientific analysis of things. Yes, you'd like to be optimistic, 2 in 3 rather than 1 in 3. 2 in 3 are successful rather than 1 in 3 is lost. But 1 in 3 is still quite, as we said at the start, quite a significant percentage. Do you think that 1 in 3 feels less significant because it's less visible in society? It's less visible around us. People don't talk about it. And therefore it's easier to minimize that actually quite significant chunk of pregnancies.
I think there are, to answer that slightly abstractly, there are a number of things in society that people don't talk about. This is one. Other things might be suicide, or, you know, there are things where the statistics aren't necessarily fully understood or appreciated by society because people sweep it under the carpet. You look at medical advancements over the last, let's say, 100 years, and you think, okay, what's the chance of dying of breast cancer? What's the chance of getting a blood infection when you go into an operation for a broken leg? Compare that to what's the chance of a miscarriage. Well, have those numbers really changed? Has it gone from 1 in 3 to 1 in 30? No. So, first question, does that matter? Is it just life? And that there's no...
Your point being that the numbers for the other examples you gave over the last 100 years have decreased significantly, whereas numbers have probably stayed exactly the same.
Exactly. So they've decreased significantly. People nowadays, people think I'm a bit unwell. Let's see what science can do for me first, rather than accepting your fate. There are other things, like we talked about, other things that's not the case for, and this is one of them. And I think that's why the work of Tommy's and this project is so important, because it brings it to the fore. And it's important to talk about these things. There will be medical advancements that can be made that will impact that number. And if you can turn a 1 in 3 to a 1 in 6 over a 20-year period, over a 50-year period, that's massive.
Yeah.
It's that sort of discussion that I think is really important, because there will always be a risk. I think there always has to be a risk, actually. It's what that risk is and why that risk is present. Is it, you know, is it 1 in 3 because there's a chunk of the population who are actually like 1 in 1 or 1 in 2 and are really skewing that number, and everybody else is like 1 in 5, 1 in 6, whatever. So the research is fundamentally important, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And I think you said it yourself. There is an element of natural selection within. I say an element of a huge part of becoming pregnant and having a successful pregnancy is down to the viability of that process, which is never going to go away. But and the work of Tommy's has shown that there are so many other elements that can be adapted, changed. Like you said, take your zinc tablets. That could be the huge difference between a yes and a no. And I think that it's twofold, really, the way I see this. Doing whatever is possible to minimize the losses that can be avoided. But then on the other side, it's the awareness within society that there are certain losses that can't be avoided, but that are equally devastating and are much more shocking to people as a result of them being a surprise. I think it's the societal tendency to sweep things under the carpet and not talk about them means that when they do happen to you, you've got so little relatability to what's going on because you've never heard anyone talk about it. You've never heard anyone mention it. You've never seen it in the media. I think your Fleabag example is probably one of very few that touches it because it's so very difficult to touch in a way that's going to be well received or going to be suitably portrayed. So it's probably in a comedy setting is quite a good way to do it, actually, because comedy uses shock and awe as a way of being funny, doesn't it? Whether that's jokes that are a bit too close to the line or whatever it may be. So yeah, it's twofold what we're trying to do. It's helping Tommy's to do that research and to help people to avoid the ones that are avoidable, but it's also just trying to put things to a bit more in the forefront of society so that people aren't blindsided by it when it does happen. And I think your approach to it has been really interesting to hear because it is perhaps slightly different to some of the other ways we've heard people talking about miscarriage. But I think it demonstrates, to my mind, it shows a different symptom of the same problem rather than the problem just not existing. Do you know what I mean? I think
totally.
It's react to those emotions and that process is to just be as pragmatic as possible about it, and that's possibly a male thing as well.
Completely. You know, I'm sure actually there'll be people listening to this who think, oh my word, how can you sort of view it in that way? And I think that's my personal way of dealing with things. And yeah, I think, I was looking into some of the stuff that Thomas does, and I think last year they received, I might have got these numbers wrong, but I'm pretty sure it was this. Last year they received something like 66 complaints for the work that they were doing or for the promotions and material they were putting out. These are people who've complained about this, are shocked by this, and they think, no, it's not appropriate. You shouldn't be publicizing this. You shouldn't be saying this sort of stuff. And one of the great things about being a charity is that you have to declare all this sort of stuff, and you have to be very open about this. But I think that's interesting in itself, that if society isn't shocked by things and society doesn't think that this is appropriate, why are these complaints being made? Yeah.
You mentioned one of the first things you said was that with how sort of life has moved on and the kids have come along, you sort of feel quite fortunate that this is something that this period of your life you can compartmentalize a little bit and falls to the back of the mind. Looking back, do you think that you could or would have dealt with things differently? Is there something that you wish you had known going into it that might have helped you and therefore might help someone else?
Napoleonic compartmentalization is the sort of the approach I think that you're talking about. You can never know everything. Everything's a learning. Everything in life is learning, right? You learn how to brush your teeth. You learn how to do it, like literally anything that you do, and this is just one of those things that you learn how to do. For some people, it's a lot harder. The learning process is a lot harder. For those 2 and 3, by the way, if you're 1-2 child family, the chances are you'll never have this issue at all, and you don't ever have to cope with this, and that in itself is a really interesting thing too. There's a whole sort of load of emotions that come with that. Should one be jealous of those who are having children with no issues whatsoever, or do you actually know what that couple's issues have been? No, you don't. The whole thing's extremely emotive, of course. Is there anything I think I would have known before all of this? I think the impact of that loss and the sort of emotional, we've got to start again, we've got to go back to the beginning, is a feeling that one has, or I certainly have, throughout my life, whatever it is, whether you're starting a relationship and it doesn't work and you get a few months in and you're like, oh, okay, that's got to go right back to the beginning. And, this is obviously totally different, but there are similarities, I think, that one can look at, and you think, well, I've got to begin again. I've got to go through that. I've got to get my ovulation sticks out again. I've got to start like peeing every single day. And by the way, I don't think my wife would be upset for me to talk about this bit. But we bought a packet of, I bought a packet of like 1,000 ovulation sticks. I said, right, use that every day. And I said, if you get anything that's other than 0, then that's interesting and that's useful, and you log it and you write it down. That in itself is frustrating because, you go through a week and you say, oh, it's 0, 0, 0, 0. So, well, yeah. But you go through 3 months, and if it's 0 all the way through, then you've got this. Then you need to take it a step further. So all data, my view is, and I come this from possibly a different approach, but from a data approach, all data is good data. All data are good data, and just because something's a 0 doesn't mean that it's not important. And that's probably something that is extremely important for Tommy's as well. If you have people who are struggling and they're not getting, then that's just as important as people who are going all the way through, and you've got to learn from everybody. So yeah, I think, I don't know. I lost my train of thought as well.
No. I think the most interesting thing that you said there from my perspective was that it's something that you've got to learn how to do. And I think that's quite a good takeaway, because I think misconception is often that becoming pregnant and having children is very straightforward. And I think there's one main takeaway from what you've said throughout this evening. It's that it's a real process for a lot of people. For some, not. But as you say, their hardships may come elsewhere. Not that I'm wishing that upon them, but it's a process, and you get better at it. And hopefully, if you keep getting better at it, then you end up with the baby that you want at the end of it.
Well, you do and you don't. So, maybe
valid takeaway, just to see it as a process rather than a binary.
And maybe you don't get better at it. Maybe your husband continues to go out drinking every single night and his zinc levels are so low that there's no hope. So, there's a whole load of things that are completely dependent and impacted on action. And there's a lot of stuff that one can do to help boost your chance of success.
Should we talk about running?
Let's talk about running.
Okay.
I don't like running. I don't actually like running.
Well, interesting you should say that. I don't have myself down as a natural born runner. Far from it. I'm not built for it. I actually find long runs, or historically I found long runs, incredibly dull. I have to say, I'm so pleased that this challenge has now actually started, because now the long runs are so interesting, because I go to somewhere new each week. I meet new people. I run round a corner and there's a table full of sweets and drinks, and it's a day out. But yeah, I wouldn't.
You're not going to get that on my run.
Well, no, but we've shot ourselves in the foot on that one. So where are you based, Tom?
I'm based in London. I spend my weekends with my mother-in-law down in Wiltshire. I have this. Sorry, yeah, and the rest. We all migrate, but it means that I, during the week, I spend all of my time running around very flat places on concrete, and during the weekends I try and get out and run very early in the morning before anyone wakes up.
Yeah.
Up and down hills.
So London,
Essentially.
London and Wiltshire.
Yeah. And my wife has said, well, why, hang on, we live in London and we live in Wiltshire some of the time. Why have you not been selected for either of those counties? Why have you been selected for a county at the other end of the country?
And why is that?
Well, and the answer I give to her is, Ollie and I went to university in Durham. We've got a lot of, it's a very familiar place for us, and symbolically, at least, it feels like the run that I would want to do most. Actually,
I agree. I did have some conflict when we were putting together as am I doing the people of County Durham a disservice by not allowing them to have some local representation? But luckily, this is my challenge and not a challenge of this being organised by anyone who's making any rules. So when obviously we needed to go to Durham, I definitely wanted to do it with someone who I was there with at uni.
I'll tell you what, when I was putting together the route, when I was looking at what the route could look like, one learns or one appreciates very quickly that Durham City is a very, very small place. And if you're trying to get to a number that starts with a 4, you ain't going to do it by just running around.
Yeah.
Running around the various streets and colleges and hills and woods and all sorts of things that we used to do, which makes me question actually how much running we ever did there. And when I plotted, the first thing I did was plot in like one of our standard runs that we do if we were training. And I thought, oh, that's about like 3K, 6K, something like that. Got to do a bit better than that.
Yeah.
So we're going to see some nice landmarks and some.
Absolutely. We'll do a run through the route before we wrap up. But you say you don't like running. What's your running history? What's your history of doing silly things, as I alluded to earlier?
I like things that are pretty long, time consuming, challenging. I like the idea of creating my own challenges or doing challenges that have been in my head or sort of in my awareness for a very long time. Running is a very good vehicle for that sort of thing. And I've done all sorts of things that are either mountain marathons, as sort of 2-day endurance things, or multi-day ultra marathons. I've never really done a fast marathon. So I think I entered one.
I don't think that's going to. I don't think that's.
It's not going to change. Not going to change. But it has meant I've certainly had to train for this. And I think the last fast marathon I entered and tried to do, it was a total disaster. I did very well on the first half bit.
Yeah.
And then I just completely blew up, and then I ended up sort of walking sort of about 10K, I think, by the end of it, and I was in a real grump. So for me, one of the big things about all of this has been training up to do something that is at a certain time and not like, I'm not going to sort of plod along.
Yeah. Well,
yeah. I've enjoyed
records, but it's not. We're not.
No. No. It's going to be an enjoyable 2.5 hours that you're going to spend with me. It will not be. It will not be.
I'm going to stop.
It's certainly going to be enjoyable.
If it's 2.5 hours, we most of it in the car, I think.
I think so too. To put it into context, a few years ago, the fastest marathon I'd ever run was about 7.5 hours, and that included going up and down the Scafell Pike as part of it.
There you go.
And I was like, well, I'm not actually that quick. I just sort of plod. I'm very happy to plod along and sort of do my. If I can get 10K in an hour, I'll be happy. But anyway,
we're doing.
We'll see where we get to.
Pike in August, so if you fancy it, you can come and do it again.
Oh yeah.
There's some landmarks to be seen in and around Durham. Tell us about the route. Where are we going? What are we doing?
We are starting off with a historic tour of our favourite haunts around Durham. So we're starting in Durham Castle, going along past the boat houses and running along the river and going up round through the woods and back out again and then through into the city. That's about 2K. So that's done. And then what we're going to do is we're going to run north, and crucially, this is to the historic county boundary, historic County Durham, as it once was. Now there's all sorts of things like Gateshead and yeah, we're that side of the river, so the Gateshead thing getting in the way. But historically, we're all okay. We follow the River Wear, the Weardale Way, up to Henshaw's Monument, which is a bit of a folly, really, but it was always visible. You could always see it from Durham, and it was this sort of Greco-Roman, Ionic, pillared, grey monstrosity on the top of a hill. But you could always see it, and I always wondered what it was. So we had a choice of going to that or going to the Angel of the North. Fortunately, our Angel of the North was a little bit too far away, so we go to Henshaw's Monument. It'd be nice to see that. It's up on top of a hill.
Angel of the North in Durham?
In historic County
Is
Durham.
it?
Yeah.
I was assuming.
Yeah, well, it's south of the River Tyne.
Okay.
Which was the previous, let's call it historic boundary of Durham.
Yeah.
We're staying within the boundary.
No, I always assumed Angel of the North was in Northumberland, but
no, that's south of the river again. Oh, now you're.
Anyway, we're not going there, so it doesn't matter.
We're not going there. I'm pretty sure it's okay, but I might be wrong. But I'm pretty sure it's okay. Anyway, it's also not as interesting route-wise because we get to go up a big hill when we go up Henshaw's Monument, right, which is you'll probably regret, and as will I. And then what we do is we run from there to Lumley Castle.
Yes.
Lumley Castle, where Chester Street, where they have the cricket, and it's a really sort of famous part of that region, but it also is important to us for other reasons. So when we were at university, there was a running group or an event, an organisation that involved running from Lumley Castle to Durham Castle, and it was 7 miles, 8 miles, something like that.
Between 7 and 8, I think.
Between 7 and 8 miles, and twice a year there would be a group of people who would sign up, and there was various obscure ways that you would have to sign up to this thing, and you sign up to this, and everyone would get deposited at Lumley Castle, and they would have to run back with their designated runner who had done the route before them in a previous year. They'd have to run from Lumley Castle to Durham Castle. On the way, they would be obliged to stop at no less than 23 public houses and seek for refreshment along the way, which I hasten to add we will not be doing. But there's a
I couldn't even want to these days.
I don't think I could.
My 18-year-old self was, I'm not even going to say far more capable of doing it, but just lacked the psychological inhibitions that now encumber me as a father of two, I think.
Yeah,
that's my excuse. Sticking to it.
But the history behind it was there used to be students from the university who were staying in Lumley Castle, and they would travel from Lumley down to Durham every now and then, and they found more and more innovative ways of doing it, and over time it evolved into a race, and then it evolved into it was the race element of it became quite unique, I think. And so that you really wanted to do that route. Now that route has been sort of impacted, I would say, historically by the construction of the dual carriageway that runs in between those two places, to the extent that the majority of that route is along otherwise unremarkable section of County Durham countryside.
When Tom had put this route together, there's the bit going north from Durham up to the monument is a bit that we'd never run or walked for and were fairly unfamiliar with. So we sent the route off to a friend of ours who sort of stayed up in Durham since we've all graduated. And she ran it past a running friend of hers, and he said, that bit's fine. The bit going north from Durham up to the monument is fine. It's really pretty. They'll really enjoy that. The one bit of advice I would give them is to completely change the 8 miles coming back, because that'd be really boring. Little does he know that that's actually the bit that we're looking forward to, mate.
I cannot say how much I'm looking forward to running along that dual carriageway.
Yeah.
I think it will be really, really weird. That's
Going to bring back a lot of memories.
Bring back a lot of memories.
But no, well,
rightly or wrongly,
emerge triumphantly back into Durham City, and hopefully our old stomping ground will welcome us in. We've spoken to some of the current crop, and they're very keen to see us, and hopefully we might have some company.
Can I say that I really love what you're doing? I think you've gone about it in a extremely sort of effective way. I think the Ollie Brown School of Fundraising is the college that everybody should attend. I think by dividing it into so many weeks with so many people and just spreading the web is just a fantastic way of doing it, frankly. And I think that your reach and your impact will be so much more by doing this than you could do it if you were just running it yourself or doing fewer weeks or whatever. So the sacrifice is, of course, on you. You're running every week. You've got a young child that's only just been born, like in the last 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And that's a really big thing for you and Amy to be going through right now, to then have to go away on every weekend and go and run these marathons. And I think that's something that's possibly not said on these podcasts, and I think it's something that's really important that people should appreciate, that it's actually not just about the running, and it's actually a real challenge logistically, from a family perspective, from a work perspective, heaven forbid. It's it's quite hard.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
So well done. Crucially, every pound spent on research is so helpful for taking the science forwards. And if there weren't people who are putting money into this, if there weren't people who are going and doing all these fundraising things, running the events that are set up by Tommy's, then that research just wouldn't happen, or it certainly wouldn't happen in the way that it does. And I think that's a really important thing that you can get across by doing these events and all of these runs.
Fingers crossed. And with that in mind, if you'd like to donate to what we're doing, please do visit the website. It's www.marathonsformiracles.com, and there's a big pink donate now button at the top. Tom, it's been a pleasure as ever. Thank you very much for your thoughts and for your time, and I very much look forward to seeing you back in Durham. Now it's getting closer. It feels very surreal to say that. I haven't been to Durham for a long time, but it's going to be really nice to be back.
It is getting closer, and I look forward to it.
Good stuff. See you then. Cheers, Tom.
Bye.